His voice echoes across millions of screens. His reactions, loud, unpredictable, unforgettable, have become the sound of a generation growing up online. They call him IShowSpeed. To some, he's hilarious. To others, he's outrageous. But to everyone, he's impossible to ignore. He isn't like other creators. He doesn't follow the script, he rips it apart. One moment he's screaming at a missed goal in FIFA. The next, he's setting the internet on fire with a reaction so wild it's shared around the world in seconds. But here's the question: who is he really? Is he just a streamer, or something more? Is he chaos, or genius? And how did a boy from Ohio rise from a small bedroom with nothing but a mic and a dream, to becoming one of the most viral personalities on Earth? The internet only sees the highlights, the laughs, the rage, the madness. But behind the screen, behind the energy, is a story very few people know. A story of risks, struggles, and turning points that almost ended everything before it truly began. Tonight, we go deeper. We'll explore how Darren Watkins Jr. transformed into IShowSpeed. The fame, the fire, the controversies, and the legacy still being written in real time with every chaotic stream. Because with IShowSpeed, nothing is ever predictable. Nothing is ever quiet. And nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever be the same again. This is the untold story of IShowSpeed. Every legend has an origin. Every storm begins with a spark. IShowSpeed is no different. His spark didn't come from money, fame, or connections. It came from something much simpler and much harder to define. A raw energy, a restless fire. Something the world couldn't look away from, even when it wanted to. But here's the thing about fire: it burns. It gives light, but it can also destroy. And for Darren Watkins Jr., the boy behind the chaos, that fire would become both his greatest gift and his biggest danger. He wasn't handed this life. There were no shortcuts, no easy wins. He faced the grind every small creator knows. The long nights, the empty streams, the silence of chasing a dream no one else believed in. Yet, in that silence, something was building. Something bigger than Darren could have imagined. Because the boy who once sat alone in a room, speaking into the void, would soon find himself speaking to millions. But the journey there? It wasn't smooth. It was messy, controversial, explosive. There were moments when it seemed like everything was over before it even began. Moments where one mistake, one slip, could have erased everything he had built. And yet, every time, speed came back louder, stronger, more unpredictable than before. Because the truth is, this story isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about refusing to fade into the background when the world tells you to quiet down. So what is the promise of this story? It's simple. Tonight, you're not just watching highlights. You're not just hearing about a streamer. You're entering the storm itself. We will uncover how Darren became Speed, the boy behind the chaos, the struggles that shaped him, the moments that nearly destroyed him, and the victories that turned him into one of the most unforgettable names on the internet. This isn't just the rise of IShowSpeed, it's the mystery of how far chaos can carry you. And trust me, the story you're about to hear is nothing like the one you think you know. Before the flashing lights, before the millions of fans shouting his name, there was just Darren Watkins Jr. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio, Darren was like any other kid, restless, curious, and full of energy that never seemed to run out. But behind that energy was a spark for gaming, competition, and the thrill of being seen. Growing up wasn't always easy. Like many kids, Darren had his share of struggles. School wasn't always smooth, life at home carried its own challenges, and the world around him didn't always seem to understand his intensity. He was loud, he was wild, and sometimes misunderstood. But gaming was different. It wasn't just entertainment, it was an escape. A place where being loud wasn't a problem, it was a weapon. A place where his energy wasn't too much, it was exactly what made him stand out. Darren didn't start with fame. His first streams weren't to thousands of people. In fact, most of the time they were to no one. Just him, a cheap microphone, and a dream bigger than anyone around him could see. Hours would pass with no chat messages, no donations, no recognition, and most kids might have given up. But not Darren. Because deep down, he wasn't just playing for views, he was building something he couldn't yet explain. Then one day, it started. A laugh here, a reaction there. Slowly, his voice began to carry further. Someone stumbled into the stream, then another, then another. The world was starting to hear the echoes of a personality too big for a bedroom to contain. But let's not romanticize it, this wasn't instant. It wasn't overnight. For every small success there were countless failures. streams with no views, videos that went unnoticed, days where it felt like nothing was changing. And yet, Darren kept showing up. Because somewhere inside him, he believed something few others did. He believed he was destined for more. It was in those early days, through trial and error, that Darren Watkins Jr. began to evolve. Piece by piece, stream by stream, the boy became the character. The name that would shake the internet awake. He wasn't just Darren anymore. He was IShowSpeed. A name that didn't just suggest energy, it promised it. A name that would soon explode across screens worldwide. But with that new identity came something else. The storm. Because the very traits that made him magnetic would also make him controversial. And soon, the world would find out exactly who he was. In the beginning, the numbers were small. 10 viewers, 20. A handful of strangers who stumbled across a teenage boy screaming into his mic, pouring every ounce of energy into a game of FIFA or NBA 2K. But to Darren, those weren't just numbers. They were proof. Proof that someone out there was listening. Proof that maybe, just maybe, his dream wasn't impossible. So he doubled down. Every night, after school, after long days, he went live. He wasn't streaming to impress. He wasn't streaming for money. He was streaming because it was the only place he felt truly alive. And then, it happened. One clip, one reaction, one burst of chaos that captured exactly who he was. It spread fast. People didn't just watch Darren. They shared him. They laughed, they argued, they couldn't look away. In that moment, IShowSpeed wasn't just a streamer anymore. He was a character, a force of nature, a living, breathing meme. His chat exploded. His subscriber count began to climb. Suddenly, streams that once had silence now had thousands of voices shouting his name. But here's the thing about fame. It doesn't arrive gently. It doesn't knock on the door. It crashes through like a storm. And Darren was about to be swept into it. The internet thrives on chaos. And chaos was exactly what Speed delivered. From hilarious rages to bizarre antics, every moment was unpredictable. You never knew what would happen next. And that unpredictability became addictive. But with eyes came judgment. With fame came criticism. Some called him a genius. Others called him reckless. But whether you loved him or hated him, you couldn't ignore him. Because IShowSpeed wasn't just playing games anymore. He was rewriting the rules of streaming itself. In just months, he went from a boy screaming into a void to a creator the entire internet couldn't stop talking about. But every rise has a price. And for Speed, that price was waiting just around the corner. Because the very energy that made him unstoppable was about to push him into dangerous territory. And then, the platforms began to act. Bans, warnings, suspensions. Overnight, streams would vanish. Accounts would go dark. Fans wondered, was this the end? For Darren, these weren't just technical setbacks. They were personal. Every ban was a reminder that his dream, the thing he worked for when no one was watching, could be taken away in an instant. But controversy doesn't only come from platforms. It comes from people. The internet turned him into a talking point, a debate. To some, he was reckless, a symbol of everything wrong with streaming culture. To others, he was authentic, unfiltered truth in a world that craves perfection. And in that storm of judgment, Darren stood at the center. A teenager suddenly carrying the weight of global attention, facing criticism most adults couldn't handle. Yet here's what made Speed different. Most would break. Most would quit. But every controversy, every mistake, every attempt to silence him only seemed to make him louder. He turned the backlash into fuel. He transformed mistakes into moments. And somehow, against all odds, the bans, the chaos, the headlines, only added to the myth of IShowSpeed. Because Speed wasn't just streaming anymore. He was surviving. He was proving that chaos, though dangerous, was also unstoppable. But survival came at a cost. Fame had shown him its darker side. And Darren knew one truth: if he was going to last, he had to evolve. Because the fire wasn't going out. It was only getting hotter. Out of the fire came transformation. For many, controversy is the end. A career destroyer. A fall from grace. But for Darren, better known as IShowSpeed, it was only the beginning of something much bigger. Because instead of fading, he exploded. The bans, the criticisms, the backlash, they didn't silence him. They made him louder. His name wasn't just in YouTube streams anymore. It was on TikTok, on Twitter, in group chats, in classrooms, in stadiums. Speed wasn't just a streamer, he was a cultural phenomenon. Every stream became an event. Every moment a clip. Fans didn't just watch him, they lived through him. His chaos, his humor, his unpredictability, It was everything the internet craved in the age of short attention spans. And then came the turning points. Collaborations with major stars. Athletes, rappers, even global icons began acknowledging his presence. He wasn't just a kid behind a screen anymore, he was standing on the world stage. But the biggest symbol of this transformation? Football. Soccer. A game that connected him not just to fans in America but to the entire world. His obsession with Cristiano Ronaldo became a bridge to millions of international fans. From Europe to Africa to Asia, they all knew one name, IShowSpeed. And this is where Darren's story takes a new shape. He wasn't just streaming in his bedroom anymore. He was traveling, performing, living moments most people only dream about. Yet through it all, one thing remained unchanged, that raw, unfiltered chaos. The same energy that brought him from 10 viewers to millions never left. He had evolved, yes, but at his core he was still Speed. The difference now, the world wasn't just watching. The world was celebrating. But fame is a double-edged sword. For every cheer there is a shadow. For every rise, a new test. And Speed was about to discover that the higher you climb, the more dangerous the fall becomes. Because becoming a phenomenon wasn't the end of his journey. It was the beginning of an even greater battle, the fight for legacy. This is the moment where chaos turned into history. From a boy screaming into a microphone, to a global phenomenon that transcended streaming, IShowSpeed had done the impossible. He wasn't just a YouTuber. He wasn't just a streamer. He was an icon of a generation. Millions tuned in not just to watch him play games, but to witness what he would do next. His name trended worldwide. His catchphrases echoed in schoolyards, stadiums, and arenas across the globe. And then came the music. Songs that began as jokes, playful chaos, turned into chart toppers. His tracks weren't just internet noise. They were anthems. Played at parties, blasted in cars, screamed by crowds who knew every word. He wasn't confined to one lane anymore. He was a streamer, a performer, a musician, a cultural voice. But the most powerful image? His connection to football. Standing in stadiums, meeting the legends he once idolized, being recognized by players who inspired him since childhood. Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, the names that belonged to the world's greatest now shared space with his. Fans didn't just see him as a fanboy anymore, they saw him as part of the story. For Darren, this was more than fame. This was proof that the boy from Ohio, the boy who once streamed to an empty room, had carved his place in global culture. But here's the mystery, is this his peak? Or is it only the beginning? Because legends are not just measured by their rise. They are measured by what they leave behind. And for Speed, the story isn't over. His energy, his chaos, his voice, it's already burned into the memory of millions. But the question still remains. When the screaming fades, when the streams end, when the world moves on, what will the legacy of IShowSpeed truly be? In the end, Darren Watkins Jr., better known as IShowSpeed, is more than just a streamer, more than just a viral star. He is a reminder that beginnings don't define endings. That you can start with nothing but a dream, a mic, and a stubborn belief in yourself, and still reach the world. His journey is messy, controversial, chaotic, but so is life. And within that chaos lies the message. Greatness doesn't always come polished. Sometimes it comes raw, unfiltered, loud, and unpredictable. From bans and backlash to stadiums and chart-topping songs, Speed has shown us that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the process. Every mistake became a stepping stone. Every setback became fuel. And maybe that's the true legacy of IShowSpeed. Not just the chaos, not just the laughter, but the courage to be unapologetically yourself in a world that constantly tells you to fit in. Because one thing is certain, whether you love him or hate him, you cannot ignore him. And long after the streams fade, long after the clips stop going viral, the story of Darren Watkins Jr. will still stand as proof that energy, passion, and belief can turn an ordinary life into a legend.